I think most people don't see themselves as a leader. Just that in and of itself, I think most people don't see themselves that way, that it's some mystical role in life. What would you say to somebody who says, I just don't know that I am a leader or could be a leader?
Well, everybody's a leader, because leadership is influence. That's what it is. And that definition of leadership has served me so well for so many years.
Yeah.
It's in fact in my book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. There's the
Great
law.
book.
You know, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So when somebody says they're not a leader, I said, well, let me ask you a question. Do you influence anybody?
Sure.
And almost always, I've had a couple maybe that I'm not sure, but almost always I'll say, well, yeah, I mean, you have children, okay, you got your family, you got, so yes. Now, it may be a little influence, it may be 8, 10 people, it may not be, but I look at them and say, okay, if you influence 8 or 10 people, you are a leader. See, what people think is they've got to have some kind of a title or position to be a leader. And so they say, well, I don't have a leadership position, so I'm not a leader. Well, you and I both know the position doesn't make you a leader anyway. Right. It gives you a chance to practice leadership. It doesn't make you a leader. So what I tell people is this: leadership is influence. So how do I increase my influence?
Correct.
Because if I influence 10 and next month I influence 20, wow, I've doubled my leadership influence. And so how do I do that? And it's a very simple answer. To increase your influence, you have to intentionally add value to people. This is where it all begins. So, Ed, let's say that I want to have increased influence with you. Well, my first question isn't, boy, I hope that it'll follow me. The first question is how can I serve you? What can I do to add value to you? So I'm going to ask you, how can I serve you? What can I do to help you? In fact, what's interesting, before we had this interview, I mean, it was cracking me up. Right. We were kind of trying to outserve each other.
That's true. Right.
Well, what can I do for you? Well, what can I do for you?
That's right. I was just thinking that.
And it was a beautiful thing, because all we were really doing is I'm trying to help you.
Correct.
And here's what I know: if I sincerely add value to you, my influence will increase with you. Yeah. That's a fact. So we don't need to make leadership complicated. Just go out and intentionally add value to people, and your influence pool begins to expand. And after a while, I'm becoming quite a leader. So leadership isn't title, position. It's all about adding value and serving and making a difference in other people's lives.
In order to do that, a lot of people are going to build an organization, build a team. They'll be in some sort of an environment like that. Nobody wins alone, it seems like, in life.
That's a fact.
I was listening to the story you were telling, and I'd like you to share it about, there's the analogy of getting people in the right seats on the bus, but you have this wonderful story about when you played basketball.
Yeah.
About at the end of practice, your coach would do something very unique. This absolutely illustrates this point so beautifully. If you don't mind saying that.
No, it's a beautiful point. He would have the first team, the better players, 5 players, play the second team. And the only thing that he would do is he would put we who were on the first team out of position. And he always stuck me. I was a number 2 guard, but he always stuck me under the basket, guarding a guy named Doug Roth that was 6'8". Okay, and he'd put maybe our center out there with the point guard. Well, he's put us out of position, and then he said, "Now stay in your position and play to 20." Well, what would happen is the first team would always lose. And he'd sit us back down and say, now, did you lose because of talent? No. Did you lose? No. You lost for one reason. You were out of position. And remember this, whenever you're out of position, you're going to lose. Well, what they did is, I'm guarding a 6'8" guy. They just throw a high pass to him. He's just dropping that belt over me the whole time. Sure. Well, you can't, and so it was a great teaching for me that no matter how gifted you are, no matter how committed you are, if you're out of position, you're not going to be successful. That's why everybody needs to find their sweet spot. What do I really do well? And on that, there's a point that I really want to make, and that is, I tell people, if you want to be highly successful, you've got to get into what I call the top 5%. Okay. So you got 100 people. You got 100 people here in whatever chosen profession you've got. You've got to be in the top 5.
Yes.
You got to get there, and you can only get to the top 5 if you're in your sweet spot. You can't get to the top 5 working on weaknesses. You can't get to the top 5 if I'm not in the area of my giftedness. So you've got to find out what you're good at, because that'll give you, if you're committed and if you got a good strategy and all this other, you got a good team around you, then that'll allow you to get in that top 5. And once you're in that top 5%, you're in good shape. You're going to do very well. And I tell them, it doesn't matter what your profession is, you got to get in the top 5%, and you can only get in the top 5% if you're in your position, if you're in your sweet spot, if you're in your gift.
Is there any technique, strategy, thought you have in order to identify what those sweet spots are for you?
Oh yeah, trial and error. I mean, when I started, let's go to I started off as a pastor, and so I had a counseling degree. So now I'm counseling people. Well, it takes me about 6 months to realize I'm not any good at that. I'm not. It's not my gift. They're coming in, and I'm listening to them, and then I say, well, okay, it's obvious. Here's your issue. Here's 3 things. And I write on a piece of paper and hand it to them and say, now go be healed. Do you know what I mean? Go be healed. And the next month they'd come back in. I'd say, now, okay, what are we in here for? well, I've got this problem. What's the problem? I heard last month. You know what I'm saying? Well, did you do the 3 things? No, I didn't do the 3 things. Oh, you go back. Well, it wore me out. I wore them out. I wasn't any good. But that's what I was trained in. But it wasn't giving me the results. And one day, it took me really took me 3 years. One day I realized that when you counsel people, you work on their weaknesses, and when you equip people, you work on their strengths.
Oh, that's good. Oh.
And the moment I went from working on weaknesses to working on strengths, I was a rock star with strengths, because you show me your strength and I'm going to give you a game plan and let's get going, because I'm a natural equipper, not a natural counselor. Yes. Nothing wrong with counseling, it's just not my gift. You with me? And what did they teach me in college? They taught me how to administrate. Yeah. So I'm in my, I've got my little country church, I'm doing administration. Well, there's no return there. My gosh. And one day I'm waking up and I'm saying, wait a minute, this isn't working. I got to go get me some volunteers to do this administration so I can get back. And so it's trial and error. And sometimes I think we go to people like, Ed, if I'm trying to find out my strengths and you and I know each other really well, I may come to you and say, okay, well, talk to me. What do I do well?
Yes.
Sometimes we don't understand our own strengths, and it takes somebody that really is a good friend that knows us well that can say, well, I think you're really good in this area. Yes. But you got to find them.
Yes.
And the good news is everybody has gifts.
That's right.
Everybody. So there's not such thing as a person, well, I just have no gifts, and so I'm left out. Everybody has them. You just got to go find them. But once you find them, that's where, and by the way, that's where you put all of your time in personal growth and development. Because the goal isn't just to learn a lot of things. I know a whole bunch of people, they're very knowledgeable, but they're not very successful.
That's right.
So what you got to do is you got to say, I'm going to stay in the area of my strengths.
Yes.
And so when at 27, when I decided I was going to speak and maybe write some books, I asked myself a very simple question: what are the areas that people need to excel in to be successful? And I came up with 4 areas.
Okay.
Relationships. If you can't get along with people, hello.
Right.
Equipping. If you can't develop a team, you may have personal success, but you're not going to have multiple. You're not going to compound success because you don't have people helping you. An attitude of overcoming adversity and difficulty, the getting back up, not quitting, that whole process, and leadership, the ability to influence people. And at 27, I said, those are the 4 things I'm going to spend my life. And if you'll look at my books, almost all of them are in relationships, equipping, attitude, and leadership.
It's true.
And I found what I found the sweet spot for people to success.
Man.
And so I wrote all my books in those areas.
I'm going to tell you something. I've read of the majority of your books. And there was a window of time where I read every single one as they were coming out, and now I'm back in that cycle again with you. And for me, the last couple minutes were really valuable because I'm obviously acknowledged, like you are, as a good leader. And but in my own mind, I've wondered whether I am sometimes, because I'm not a great counselor either. And I mean that, like when people are looking for counsel from me, but what I am, I do feel like I'm really good at identifying giftedness in people.
Yes.
I see giftedness. I think I'm good at equipping people. And so leaders come in different shapes, sizes, and forms. That was just really a good validation just for me, and I think it would be for certain people listening to this, because I think also sometimes people that are really good at executing themselves potentially maybe struggle with counseling people on to do things, but they're great at they could be great at equipping.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And what I found is successful people are really good at finding their gifts, getting in their gift zone, and then just really staying there and becoming successful.
I think they're happier too.
Oh yes, but successful leaders, here's the difference. successful leaders have the ability of what you just described, Ed, of finding the sweet spot for other people and getting them in that sweet spot.
Yeah.
And that's where the return is.
That's right.
I've spent my life, after I discovered what my strengths were, now I'm just helping other people find their strengths, because there's nothing more empowering to a person than to find out that they are good at something and then being equipped and taught how to do it well.
That's honestly what you just described is what I enjoy doing most of my life.
That's why you're a leader.
Well, I hope
very
I'm
good
working
leader.
on it. Thank you. I just want you to know something. Like the whole interview, everything we're doing today, that wasn't valuable for me because I've struggled even myself. Like, why am I? That's an element of my ability with people that's just limited. I'm not great at counseling people, but I am good at equipping them. So it's just a distinction that I really appreciate. One other thing about teams, and then I want to talk about the new book. But one thing I want to talk about on building teams and having teams is, I have probably talked about the law of the catalyst.
Oh yeah.
In my life and business that you've talked about in various different books.
Yes.
Both identifying them in an organization so that they can grow, and also wanting to be identified as one, as someone coming through an organization. Could you just talk about, most people listening to this are familiar with your work, but obviously there are people that aren't as well. So what is that law of what is a catalyst in an organization? Why is it important? Why do you want to be one?
Well, Ed, that's out of my book, The 17 Laws of Teamwork. And basically that chapter is about the fact that good leaders have the ability to make things happen. And so when people look at me and they say, okay, John, I'm looking for maybe a potential leader, what's the first thing I look for? The first thing I say for them to look for is, look for somebody that makes things happen.
Yes.
Because but there's a whole bunch of people, they're wondering what happened. You know what I'm saying? And they're not the one you want to recruit. Right. So I say, go find, because here's what I discovered. If you can make things happen for yourself, you now have the credibility to make things happen for other people. Whoa. If I'm not successful, there is no appeal for you to follow me. I tell people all the time, success is the credibility of a leader to lead. Because you think about it, no one ever got, nobody ever said, oh my gosh, I'm financially in deep weeds. Oh my gosh, I think I'm going to go call my buddy Joe. He's been bankrupt 3 times. Hey Joe, help me. No, you don't follow Joe. Joe's been bankrupt 3 times. You got to go find somebody that's successful with money. I'm going to get a divorce. Oh my gosh, I'm going to call Jack. He's been divorced 4 times. Jack, help me with my marriage. You see, people, when they need help, the first thing they think about is, who is better than me that I can follow? And so the credibility of a leader as far as to lead is that they're successful. I mean, if I'm successful, I say, hey, I'd want to join my team. Well, of course. I mean, if LeBron James was in the room right now, LeBron says, we're going to play a little basketball, and LeBron says, I'll pick, and then John will pick. Well, when LeBron's there, you've got your hand up and say, LeBron, pick me, because you're going to win if you get LeBron. And every time I'm getting ready to pick, you're diving behind the chair.
It's a fact.
You don't want to be on my team. You're going to lose on my team. And so what I tell people all the time is that the first thing you've got to do is you got to get good yourself. If you're why would I ever think that I should lead somebody if I'm not any good at it?
So true.
Okay, but once I'm good and I've found my success, now I begin to say, okay, how do I compound this? Well, I compound this by looking at Ed and saying, okay, Ed, let me help you find your sweet spot, and let's get you on this same road, because now all of a sudden, this is how I really build a team. And so the law of the catalyst is all about making things happen. And that's what I look for. I mean, Jack Welch, his phrase was, that, who's going to get out of the pile? He'd say when he's at General Electric, there's a big pile of people in this company. Well, who's going to get out of the pile? Well, somebody's going to climb out. Mark Cole is the CEO. I have 6 companies, and Mark Cole's the CEO of them. And the reason he is because he got out of the pile. He got out of the pile. He started in the stock room. And
did he really?
Yeah,
Mark did?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did he really? Wow.
And I just took him out last week. That's
awesome.
Mark's here, by the way. He's cracking up over this.
Here with us.
But he got out of the pile. In other words, everywhere he was, he succeeded. And everywhere he went, he won. And after a while, you just sit there and say, okay, I think I'll let him run this thing, because he knows how to do it. And so for all of us, I say, before you go lead somebody else, just kind of get good yourself.
So right. You're a mutual hero of mine, friend of yours that we were talking about off camera, Art Williams.
Oh,
and
my.
How important is leadership, right? And Art would used to say, and still probably does, say, you want to show me any church, Boy Scout troop, football team, company, I'm going to show you something being run by a leader.
That's right.
And in every great company, the leaders are great at identifying catalysts. I mean, and when you find them, pay them well, keep them, because they're priceless when you have them. Somebody, I'm sure Mark's over there nodding his head that you should even pay him even better. So,
yeah.
But I wanted to say something to you about your books that I think are just, they're such great reads. They're easy to read. They're memorable. He makes points and then backs them up with incredible stories and anecdotes and quotes. And so it's the other thing about your books. They're incredibly, I would say, the information is profound, unique, and deep, yet very easy to, you equip people so well with the way you write it that it's transferable.
That's right.
The information is so transferable. You do that better than anybody's work that I read. I enjoy reading every single book. The problem with your books oftentimes is when you highlight them, you would almost be better off in John's books, highlighting the parts that you don't want to go back and remember, because he's literally just covered in highlighter when you highlight his books. I'm serious.
Thank you, buddy.
It's an absolute fact. I always get tired of highlighting. It's like every single part of every single page, it would seem to be.
Well, I'm a communicator. So let's start here. You know, an educator takes something simple and makes it complicated. I mean, think of all, think of all my college, all this stuff. I mean, in an educational world, if you're not confused, they're not happy.
So true.
I mean, their sentences are a paragraph long. I mean, by the time I get down to the paragraph, I forgot what the first part of the sentence was. I got to go back and read the paragraph. Instead of short sentences, I'm dealing with a paragraph. But a communicator is exactly opposite. They take something complicated and make it simple. Wow. And so when I write a book or when I speak, doesn't matter. My first objective is to keep it so simple that when I say it, it immediately resonates with people. Wow. In fact, anytime you have to explain what you said, you didn't say it right the first time. So my joke is I put the cookies on the lower shelf so everybody can have some. And so, simple as far as understanding, but deep, because there's a difference.
Sure.
But deep when it comes to profound results that it will make in your life.
It's an absolute fact.
So, I mean, one of the principles I teach is very simple. I just hold my arm up in the air and I say everything worthwhile is uphill. Everything. Everything. There's nothing in your life worthwhile that's not uphill. It's all uphill. Well, everybody gets it. I mean, it's all uphill.
So good.
And here's the problem. We get uphill hopes, but we have downhill habits. Okay, we're in trouble. Got a downhill habit, you're not going uphill. Got to change that habit. So everything that I teach with a real passion to keep it simple, but keep it very practical, and make sure that the principle is life-changing.
Yes.
If you could do those three things, then you really got to go. And when I wrote the book Leader Shifts, I've been sitting on that book probably for a good 12 years.
Have you really? Wow.
In fact, a lady on our team named Erin, who does a lot of content for me, she shared with me, she said, John, you really need to get that book out. And I kind of put it on the shelf and really wasn't too excited about getting it out because I thought, I don't know, this may be a little too simple. But when I started writing, I thought this is going to be life-changing. And now that I'm looking at the book coming out, I'm so excited because here's what happens. We start leading in a way that gives us some success. And immediately we get into this pattern. And what we don't understand is that leadership, if leadership is about anything, it's about adjusting and being flexible. And if you want to be a manager, then nail it, get it straight, do it the same way every time. That's management. But when it comes to leadership, in fact, if you go back into the 1980s, there were no leadership books in bookstores. Right. They were all management books.
Right.
Because you were trying to manage your company, your business. And then things began to change so fast, people were saying, this management stuff doesn't work because this baby isn't staying the same. I turned around and it moved on me. Man. And so I've got to get in front of it. And so leadership is all about being in front. Well, if you're in front, one of the first things you know is if you're in front, you don't know everything.
Yes. So
the issue is not knowing everything. The issue is when you know something, adjusting as quickly as you possibly can. Because if we don't adjust quickly, we miss it.
Yes.
Because it's a timing thing.
Especially today.
Oh, well, I was getting ready to speak for a company recently, and their theme was fast forward, and we were doing a pre-call, and they asked me, they said, what's fast forward mean to you? I said, well, fast means faster. As you look in the future, if anybody thinks that the future is going to be a little bit slower, or I love these people say, well, honest to God, I'm just waiting for things to slow down. You know what? I would suggest dying. That's what that's probably about the only way it's going to slow down for you. So fast is faster, but let me tell you something. Forward is shorter. When I started off as a leader, we had 10-year long-range plans. And 5-year was a mid-range. A short-range plan when I started off, now I'm talking about in the dark ages now, was a 2-year plan.
Yeah.
Well, a 2-year plan now, that's a ridiculous long range. I mean, that kind of makes you suck air. You say, I think that's a little bit long.
Yes.
So what I know is fast is faster and forward shorter.
Very good.
So let me tell you something. The only people that are going to win are people that can make leader shifts and adjust quickly. And so I wrote the book. I talk about 11 leaderships that I've made in my lifetime. Yes. And people ask me all the time, they say, John, how have you stayed, I'm 71, how have you stayed on top of your game? And I say, it's very simple. It's not the same game.
Gosh.
Okay, baseball is called baseball, but it's not the same game.
So true.
I mean, you don't go to the baseball game the second day and say, oh my gosh, now wait a minute, that leadoff hitter got a single yesterday. Oh, he struck out. Oh my Lord. You see, it maybe had the same title.
Yeah.
But it isn't the same game.
Yes.
And you don't lead today's game on yesterday's results.
No kidding.
Babe Ruth said one day, he said, yesterday's home run won't win today's game.
That's right.
And I'll tell you what, yesterday's thinking won't win today's game either. So I talked about leader shifts that you need to make in your life to keep you on the edge and to keep you adjustable and flexible so that you can really lead your people well. Because here's what I know. People don't like change.
You're right.
So when the leader is resistant to change, he's going to get into this leadership gravity pool, or she is, that's going to go down every time. Because I can tell you, you're not going to have the people behind you saying, come on, let's make some more changes. Let's make some more adjustments. No. Remember, they're wanting to hold on to what they have. And your job as a leader is to say there's something better. If you'll just let this go, there's something better for you here tomorrow. And that's and that's what the good leaders do.
I want to know what you meant by train leaders to transformational leaders. Just what that means, and then they can obviously read the book to get all the details. But what's a trained leader compared to a transformational leader?
Well, now you're in the core of my calling, because I have an organization, a nonprofit organization called Equip, and so it's designed to train leaders. And so we, especially in the faith community, made a commitment to. We started off with what we call a 1 million leader mandate. Let's see if we can train 1 million leaders in the world. We accomplished that, and again, as a vision, as you go, the vision expands. And I said, now that we trained 1 million leaders, I wonder if we could train a leader in every country of the world. And so we focused on, and in 19 years from starting this organization, in the 19th year, we had trained 5 million leaders in every country of the world. We are the largest leadership training organization in the world.
Wow.
And it was so fulfilling and so satisfying. I mean, and so the board, we got together. I mean, we're obviously we're having celebrations and parties, and we hit this, and so we're in a board meeting, and it was kind of like, wow, look what we did, look what we did. And all of a sudden there was a restlessness within me. And I said, you know what, I think there's a level higher than what we've done. And they're all looking at us, what do you mean, we trained all these leaders? And we went into, I bet about a 3-hour discussion that day with my board, because a lot of them said, boy, let's end it. We just scored, we just won the Super Bowl, and here you're kind of wanting to dive back in. And what I told them was, I said, well, the good news is we've trained leaders. So leaders know what to do. But just because you know how to lead doesn't mean you're changing lives. And I said, I think there's a higher level of leadership than trained leaders, and that's transformed leaders. And so we've got to figure this out. And honestly, even my key people, they looked at me and said, boy, I don't think we understand this transformation. What's transformation? And what I told them was, I can't explain it, but when you see it, you'll know it.
Oh my goodness.
And so we started going in and developing the identity, the characteristics of a transformational leader. And then we started understanding that if you're going to if people are going to be transformed, it's got to be in small groups like round tables, not in massive audiences. And we trained in auditoriums and massive audiences, and people are taking good notes, and they're learning it. But transformation happens when you and I are talking, and you're encouraging me and challenging me, and I'm asking questions, and we're having that give and take. So we said, let's go see if we can transform countries. And we started with Guatemala. And there's just three things to think about. We start top down. We don't even go into country unless the president asks us. So we come in by the invitation of the president. We have 22 presidents of countries who have now asked us to come in and do transformation. So I mean, the line's getting long because things are. So top down, because influence filters down. It doesn't filter up. So I mean, we go, with top government, top business, top education, top religion, top media, top arts. We go and we get permission. So it's top down, but then transformation also. It goes small round table to big. Mass movements don't begin with a mass. They begin with a few people. So it goes, round table, small, big, and then we teach values, because what changes people's lives are values, which is inside out. It's inside out, small, big, top down. And we've got this strategy, Ed, and we've trained 500,000 people in Guatemala now.
Oh my gosh.
And we're going for the tipping point. 10% of a nation we're wanting to be in round tables, because that's the tipping point. Malcolm Gladwell tells about. And we're in Paraguay now, and we are in Costa Rica, and I just came back from Kenya. I went to Saudi Arabia this year, and by the invitations of the leaders, of the country. And so it's so exciting. And so in leaderships, I talk about transformation, and it's just one chapter, but it was a shift I made, and it was a great shift. And but probably every book I write from now on, I'll have something transformation, because we're seeing such life change, and I'm living and watching this, that it's kind of like it's contagious, and I'm wanting to share it with others, because I think that once a leader understands transformation, they go to a whole new level of their leadership. And now people aren't just following you because you're going to help them be successful. They're following you because their life is being changed.
Oh my gosh.
And that's a whole different game.
There's people watching this, they say, look, I'd like to start to transform my life.
Yeah.
There's transformational leaders, but I need to transform my life. I want to take a step towards being happier, being more successful. And they had a minute with John Maxwell. They ran into you in a coffee shop. They said, Mr. Maxwell, I've got a question for you. What would your advice be to me about just transforming my life? What would be the step you would take, the thought I should have, the action maybe I should take? Your answer to them would be what?
Well, and in fact, I'm going to talk to them right now. Being a person of faith, the first thing I would share with you is a relationship with God, okay? And if you don't have a relationship with God, you're my friend, love you as much as someone that does, so please understand that. I'm not trying to convert you. It's just that when you find something that really is beautiful, you want to share it with everybody. And I remember when I became a person of faith, the verse that grabbed me the most is the verse that says, if a person is in Christ, he becomes a new creation. And I did. I became a new person, again, because of him. Now, let's skip that, okay? If you're not a person of faith, just act like you never heard it, okay? Let's go to the real thing. I would sit down at the table with you and I'd say, if you really want to be transformed, you have to live an intentional life. This is so simple, I don't want you to miss it. Most people don't lead their life, they accept their life. And when you accept your life, you are living on things that are not worthy of your time and effort and energy. And you heard me say in a moment, everything worthwhile is uphill. The reason I want you to understand that is, to go uphill, you have to be intentional. Nobody ever went uphill by accident. You've never read a book on accidental achievements. You have to be intentional with what you do and who you are. And so I would just say to you, find your strengths, become very intentional, and commit your life every day to it's all uphill. It's all uphill. And listen, Ed's very successful. He's got great businesses, he's made a lot of money. Can I tell you something? It's still uphill for him. See, the great mistake we make is we think, I'm going to go out and make enough money, and there's a day when I can relax and I can rest, and everything's going to be easy. Can I tell you something? The day that you have that day, one of your children, gets in an accident, problems will never, ever leave you. Issues, obstacles, difficulties, they're always going to surround you. So you never get to that place where you've got it made. You're not supposed to got it made. You're supposed to add value to people, and it's all uphill.
Oh my gosh.
So the moment I understand that, then what happens is I commit myself to it, and then it becomes a beautiful uphill climbing life. Because one thing that's beautiful about going uphill is the scenery is really good. So you got to be intentional with it. So that's what I would say to them. Be intentional. Start today. And here's the difference. Good intentions are overrated. Gosh. I know so many people, well, I'm going to do that. Yes, I think that's a good idea. I think I'm going to do that. So good intentions are the most overrated phrase in the world. You've got to go from good intentions to good actions. Nothing happens until you've got good actions, and you won't have good actions until you're intentional with your life. My name's John, and I'm your friend. And I'm yours.
Hey, it's Ed Mylett. I just wanted to thank you for being here, and I would ask you to please subscribe to the show. If you just click the subscribe button here, I would really appreciate it. It helps the show grow so we can get even more successful guests on the program to help you. At the same time, if you're subscribed, you're going to get access to the programs before anybody else in the world gets access to them. So if you would, click subscribe right here. Thanks so much.
You do something you talk about in the book. We might as well just start there. You have the ability to take really complicated things and make them seem simple.
Yeah.
And you talk about that as actually one of the laws in the book of being able to be a great communicator. Is that something that you do? I'm sure you do it intentionally, but do you do it naturally?
Well, I do it intentionally. Let me say this. I was a good student, but I wasn't a great student. And so a lot of times when I was in college or in a classroom, I would want the professor to break it down and make it much more simple. I would look around the room and I said, am I the only one that's having a hard time here and not maybe grasping and learning like I need to? And so I really, as a student, I worked on helping. When I would hear a talk, I would say, how could that be reduced so I can apply it to my life?
Yeah.
And so it almost started as a student. And I learned to reduce things and bring them down. And I tell people all the time, I'm a communicator, not an educator. An educator takes something simple and makes it complicated. I mean, that's just who they are. I mean, honestly, if you're in the education world, if you're not confused, they're not pleased. You know what I'm saying? And then a communicator takes something complicated, makes it simple. And so my whole goal is to make things very palatable for people. One of the things I teach in the book is the fact that if you have to keep explaining what you just said, you haven't said it right the first time. I mean, and how many times we have a person explain and explain, I just sit there and think, why didn't you take some time on the front end to simplify this so that everybody can apply it to their life? And there are three, real quickly, there are three kind of, I take the simplistic, I start with simplistic, and simplistic is not good. It's fast and it's easy, but it's not really deep and helpful. And it's a half truth. It's never a whole truth. So if I say things like experience is the best teacher, that's a simplistic statement. But it's not true. If it were true, then as people got older, everybody get better. And I know a whole bunch of people, they're getting older, but they're not getting better. The experience isn't helping them at all. Although experience is not the best teacher, reflection and learning from that experience is the best teacher.
Wow.
So how do I get from experience as the best teacher to reflection and learning from experience as the best teacher? Well, you've got to go from simplistic to complicated or complex. In other words, you've got to wrestle with the statements. And you've got to contextually take them from every angle until you can come to something that is really solid and something that is really true and something that really works. And so just as simplistic is easy and fast, complicated is slow and deep. But once you come through that, and it takes a while to do that, once you come through it, on the simple side now, it's fast, but it's deep. In other words, people can grab it real quick, but then they go home and they think about it, Ed, and they just can't get away from it. Like when you wrote the book, when you wrote the book, The Power of One More, that is so simple that you can grasp it immediately, but you can't. You have to spend a lot of time on it to work it out in your life.
What a great point. Yeah, what a great point. Yeah.
And so here's the issue. I think in communication, when I was a young communicator, I saw that I had charisma, and I saw that I could probably get by on stage with having fun with people and enjoying them and making them laugh. And I came to this decision: am I going to wing it, or am I going to work for it? And I was tempted to wing it because I could wing it and I could get by with it. See, here's the challenge: when you're gifted in a certain area, you can wing it and still be successful.
Right.
You can be in that top 20%.
Yes.
But to work for it, that's a whole different game. And in the law of simplicity, you have to work for this. You have to work. Simple is hard work. But if you work for it, you can get in the top 2%.
Yeah.
And so what I tell people all the time is the tendency and the temptation is in giftedness is you don't give it all, because you just don't have to give it all. I mean, it comes. But because you don't give it all, you do well, but you don't do very, very well. But if you would just work on that area of giftedness, you get in that top 2%, and you know as well as I do, if you're in the top 2%, whatever it is, you own whatever you want to own. The world is yours. And so simple, I decided at a very young age, in my 20s, I was going to work for it. I'm just going to work for it. And I spent a lot of time. This morning I write every day. This morning I was writing, and I was wanting to make a statement. And I worked on a statement probably for 40 minutes. And I would write it, and I said, no, that's not quite right. I got to work. No, it's still doesn't fit. And then finally, about 20 minutes later, I thought, okay, I got it. There it is. So I get up and I make the statement, and people say, oh my gosh, that just flows out of him. No, it didn't flow out of me. It didn't either. It had to cook and work it inside of me a long time, but I get it to the place where it flows out of me. But it doesn't flow. Good stuff doesn't happen automatically. It has to be.
You know what's interesting? When I tell people that I do that too, that are other speakers, I kind of watch oftentimes their face kind of glaze over, like, you really do that? And I say, I do, because I want to be as effective as I can. By the way, I should have started out by saying to everybody that you can go to 16lawsofcommunication.com, and that's with the 16 in it, 16lawsofcommunication.com. You get the book, and I guess there's favorable pricing in there too. You can actually get it for less. So 16lawsofcommunication.com, you can go get it. Listen, I can just say this with all conviction in the world. The best books I've read collectively in my life are John's books. And the best speaker that I admire, that I look up to, is John. So when he writes a book on this topic, it is something that you need to have. And for the record, everybody, some of you are listening to this going, I'm afraid to speak. I don't know that I should be one. And one of the brilliant things in the book is, and I'll have you talk about this, John, is that a great speaker, and I have found this, I think when I was young, when I would speak, if I'm being honest, part of it was about me, probably a significant part, meaning I wanted to impress them. I wanted to wow them. I wanted them to think I was great. And that did a few things. One, I made less of a connection. But two, it put tremendous pressure on me because it was about me. And a lot of you that are afraid of speaking, that would probably be great at it, it's because you're approaching it already from it being about you. And if you would just shift the impact to the service of others, your piece about even trying to do it would change, and you'd be a 10 times better speaker. So that's one of the laws in the book too. So we might as well start there, because I think some people need to come into this tent of speaking, John, to the tent of communication, that think they don't belong in our tent, and they do belong in the tent. Their flawed thinking is they think it's about them, and that creates anxiety and fear, which is sort of ego-driven. So talk about that for a second.
100%, my friend, 100%. It's the law of connecting. And the law of connecting just simply says communicators know that it's all about others. It's all about others. And I can identify exactly. When I started speaking, it was all about me. I mean, I hope they like me. I hope I say it right. Did I say it right? Oh my gosh! And it became like I was a nervous bundle.
Yes.
Because I was man. I hope I did okay. So when people say, John, what's the one thing? I know there are 16 laws, but what's the one thing to be a great communicator? Well, the one thing, Ed, is you have to get over yourself. You just have to get over yourself. It is not about me. It's about the audience. It's not about me. It's about the small group I'm dealing with. It's not about me. It's about the one person I'm talking, having a one-on-one conference. It's all about them. And until I can get over myself, because if it's about me, I can't really add value to you if I'm thinking about me. Right. I'm not that good. I don't have the ability to think about me and think about you and be good on both ends. I'm a little limited. Maybe some people can, but I can't. So if it's going to be about you, I've got to be thinking about you, and I've got to be focused on you. And very quickly you'll realize, John really wants to help me and add value to me. I mean, it's contagious, and it's that connection. So I tell people to get over themselves, and so what we did it when this book released, we did a video, and I told the people that were producing, I said, I want to start the video in the audience. I said, I don't want you to shoot me on stage, and I was in the audience all by myself, sitting in a chair. And they zoomed in on me, and I said, this is where great speaking begins, right here. I have to constantly be thinking about the people, and how can I connect with them? What can I say? How can I help them? Where are they? You know, you have to find them before you can lead them. You just don't start leading people. You just don't start speaking. You have to find them. And as soon as you find them, now all of a sudden you have the credit. So this whole get over myself, let me tell you a fun story. There's a company in Nashville. This guy has a very successful writing company. And he's read my books. In fact, he came to me. I didn't know him. He said, I built my business off your stuff. And he said, you ought to write songs based on your books. Well, I looked at him and said, man, I've never done that before. But you know me, I'm 76. But I keep growing. I keep learning. I mean, why not try this? So I went to Nashville, and he put me in the studio with like guys that wrote #1 hits. I mean, big hits. They were, you know, I'm like, I always say, if you're at the head of the class, you're in the wrong class. Well, I shouldn't even been in the class on this one. I mean, these guys were pros, and I'm in there throwing it at. And so we took the book on the laws of communication, and I said, I would like to use the Get Over Myself theme. And so we wrote a song called Get Over Myself. And so if you're listeners, all you got to do is go wherever you know, I don't know where you get your music, but wherever you get it, just, you know, get over myself. And the chorus says it all, is that I got to find myself to know myself. I got to know myself to be myself. I got to be myself to improve myself. I got to improve myself so I can get over myself. Wow. So I can give myself to you.
Oh, wow, John. That's very good.
And the song is going crazy. The song's going crazy. I got another one from my book, Make Today Count, called Day by Day. And I got my Sometimes Win, Sometimes You Learn book or songs will come out next month. But I'm having a blast writing these songs. And of course, again, I'm the least of the least. Yeah. And they're so kind to even let me in the studio with them. But I'm throwing this stuff up, and we're having a blast. But I tell you, the moment that you think about the audience, and I can hardly wait to speak. I'm not nervous at all. I can hardly wait to speak, because I'm going to go out and I'm going to give them something that is going to help their life. And that is so fulfilling and so enriching to me that it gets me over anything that is about me. And
yeah.
It's all about
Are you getting ready to win a Grammy? This will be, you're going to win a dang Grammy for your music now.
I don't think so. I have no idea, but I know I'm having fun. You know, again.
I don't know if you all understand this. John's 76 years old. And I think you all go, hey, man, Ed, you work hard. They see my social media and my pace. And I am telling you, this is not, I'm not being nice. John is everywhere all the time, crushing it. Crushing it. Yet, like before we went on, he's telling me about golf that he just played. There's a way to have
I think one of the keys to longevity is that you do live a full, rich life, but you do bust your tail the entire time. I've been with John's, but I just got back from Europe. I'm going here. Now I'm in Tennessee. Oh, I got to fly to California. I'm like, my gosh, am I getting outworked by John? And by the way, you can tell his enthusiasm level is through the roof as well. I want to ask you this, though. Did you just say you're not nervous when you speak? Do you not get nerves at all anymore?
Not a bit. No.
Have you had, I think you tell a story, though, a time you did. I think you're going to Boston. I think it's going to Boston, maybe.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, I study you. So you're going to Boston. As I think the story goes, you were replacing a speaker or something. But there's a great lesson in this story. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah. You talk about Peter Lowe when he had his seminars. And he called me one day, and I was home, and he said that, oh, gosh, the guy that was Superman in the movies.
Chris Reeves.
What's his name?
Reeves.
Christopher
Reeves.
Yeah, Christopher Reeves. Christopher Reeves.
Yes.
Okay. He was sick, and he was the last speaker on the day, and he said, I can't speak today. And so Peter says, he called me in the morning and said, John, can you get up to Boston and fill in? I said, well, yeah. So I jumped on a plane, and I went up to Boston. And I got there just maybe 30 minutes before I was supposed to speak, and so I'm kind of backstage. They're getting me all hooked up. Mm-hmm. And then I find out they haven't told the crowd. Hello? They haven't told the crowd. And that Christopher Reeves is sick and isn't going to be here. The crowd, they've been staying all day waiting for Superman to come and show. And I'm backstage saying, you haven't told them yet? What do you mean? What are you doing to me? They're looking for Superman. They're not going to get Superman. They're going to get the Pillsbury Doughboy out there. They're not getting Superman. They're getting Fat Man. What are you doing? I kid you not. They went out right before. Now they're Christopher Reeves. Here he comes. Superman's about to come. Superman. And they said, we're so sorry, Christopher Reeves couldn't come today. And we have John Maxwell. Well, 300 people get up and walk out as I'm coming out on stage. They're already leaving. They're already leaving. And then when they see me, another 200 people get up and they leave. And it's like horrible. And I looked at him, and of course, all you could do is you just start laughing and say, I'm so sorry. You know what I'm saying? Now the good news is, once I started speaking, no one else left. Yeah. But hello. Who's gonna replace Superman?
Did you say something when you came out to grab their attention or to get them or to connect with them? Did you say something that saved them?
I said, guess what? I'm not Superman. I'm in trouble, and you're going to have to help me. But if you'll stay with me, I'm going to help you. And you know what I did? I got him on my side. Really, what I did is what you do in cases like it's like the international audience. When I speak internationally, I ask them questions all the time. I'll say, now, I want to tell you a story, but does this happen in your culture? And sometimes they'll say yes, and I'll say, okay, let me tell you. What happens is if you do that, you engage them, and very quickly they become an ally, and they get on your side, and so they help. So when they realized that I wasn't Superman, they said, well, Fat Man needs my help. I'm going to hang with him, and they did, and so it came out okay. But obviously, I was set up. I was set up for. There's no goody thing about. When I saw that on back. Never in my life have I been more tempted to turn around. And
my gosh. I can't even imagine.
Hey, not only is Superman sick, Fat Man just got sick too.
My
you know what I'm saying?
I'm actually crying. I'm actually crying thinking about it. And by the way, you guys, I know that because he's my dear friend, I say this, but I want you to get this book. I just really believe that more people could be great communicators than actually think they can be. And so go to 16lawsofcommunication.com. and get John's book. The thing that John, I think, is maybe the best I've ever seen at, and it's one of the laws. It's law number 12 in the book. You have to read the book to get all the laws, everybody. We're going to go through a few of them today. But one of the laws in the book, and by the way, you all are good at this. You just need to work on the skill because there's certain areas of your life you're already great at it. And that is that I think great speakers, in fact, my favorite people to be around at a dinner or a lunch are storytellers. People who can tell a story. And law number 12 is the law of storytelling. which you just did so well right there. But elaborate on that a little bit because I watch a lot of speakers throw a bunch of facts and PowerPoint and slide this and slide that. And I'm like, facts tell, but stories sell, right? Like I want to hear a story. I'm going to remember the story. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, you know, I think when you were with us the last time, you were talking a lot about the story of your father.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it just, what it does is it humanizes the speech.
Mm.
When you tell a story, immediately you're telling their story. Because when I tell a story, we all have commonness in our life. And all of us have commonness in experiences. That's why when you're in a group and somebody tells a story, what's it do? It triggers somebody else's, oh, and I remember doing it. And all of a sudden, you're going around the table and you're just bouncing off each other. But what happens is stories stimulate our own personal journey and our own personal stories. And it becomes something that everybody can identify with. You know, I grew up as a theologue, so I was trained in theology. And basically, one of the things they taught me, which was terrible, is they said, "Don't tell personal stories, because it'll make people think that you're kind of like a narcissist or an egomaniac." And so for my first year, I didn't tell any personal stories. I just told stories, and they were good. But one day I just told a personal story, and everything came alive. And what I found out was that when I tell my story, it lives in me, and when I'm teaching or lesson or I'm speaking, I can either transfer information from me to you, which is not effective at all, or if it goes through me to you. Wow. There's a difference between coming from me to you and through me to you. And so whenever I'm doing my writing of a lesson, I always make sure that I have some personal illustrations in it. Yeah. And I always ask, and the other thing is, I ask myself when I'm doing that, do I live this? Is this something I'm living? Because when I was young, in my 20s, Ed, I made an important decision that I was only going to teach what I lived and what I believed. And I just wasn't going to teach. And so there are a lot of things I don't teach at all. And some of them are probably very good, but I just don't live them, or I maybe don't believe them. And what I found is, personal conviction, moral authority comes from the life that you've lived. And so we teach what we know, but we reproduce who we are.
Oh my gosh.
And stories are who we are. And they're so transferable. Do people remember numbers? Do people not remember stats? I don't even use charts and things like that. Honestly. And the reason I don't use them is because I never understood them myself. And so it's kind of like, if I can't figure them out, if you can't figure them out, you sure can't teach them, that's for sure. Yeah. And so, but stories live. They have breath to them. And they draw the people in immediately. And when you were at our conference, you were so superb. You were so superb. When you started talking about your relationship with your dad, everybody had a relationship with a dad.
Yeah. By the way, so did you. I want to acknowledge something about you. I want to say one thing, everybody. I was just sitting here listening to you. I was thinking, man, this is pretty cool for people to listen to two of the more sought after speakers in the world talk about this topic. And then the best, John, has written this book about it. But that day, so by the way, what I try to do is try a me story with a you meaning.
Oh,
Yeah, meaning I'm telling a story about me, but you're getting your own meaning from it. That's an important key, everybody, when you tell stories. And John's the master at this. But that day, the other thing it does is it gives you more dimension. So what they see when you walk out on stage is the current version of you. And when you begin to tell stories about different times in your life, it gives you dimension, and it actually alters their perspective and time of you. So even that day, and I know you well, after I spoke, it doesn't matter what the story was, everybody, but John then got up and actually, I don't know if you remember this, John, you talked about your dad and lessons he had taught you and what a prayerful, good man he was in lessons. And what it did, it's interesting, because even now when I see you, it's different. I just want to tell you the impact a story can have. I pictured you as a little boy. Yeah. And so I've always admired you as a mentor, but you're older than me. You were always, like, when I started in this space, the first book I read was your leadership book, right? The Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And so I've always pictured you at this version of your life. And when you started to tell this story about your dad, it switched, and now I could see you as a little boy. And then I saw you in your 30s because the story was from those times. Yeah. And it gave a depth and a connection that went far deeper, not just the story, but a different time in our lives. Gives you a dimension when you speak. And it's actually, now when I see you, I actually see the little boy and the man that I admire. Yeah. And it's very deep connection when somebody does that. And that day you were emotional speaking about your dad as well. But I just want to acknowledge that. Something that I noticed when you did it that day for me, because I've watched a lot of speakers.
And can I jump in on that just for a second? Yeah. Because this is so helpful. Because I love your dimension phrase, because that's exactly right. If I could have one wish granted, you see, people are seeing me on the back end. And they're seeing me where all the success is, and it's compounded through the years. It's just compound. And what I say is, in the beginning, you're not as bad as people think you are, but if you do it right, in the end, you're not as good as people think you are, because it compounds. And if I had one wish yet, it would be that people could have seen me in the beginning.
What would they see?
Well, they would have seen a person that wasn't a very good communicator. Wow. They would have. Here's why I want them to see me in the beginning. If they saw me in the beginning, everybody would have great hope for themselves. If they saw me in the beginning, every person would say, I can do that. That's as reachable as can be. That guy wasn't that good. I can bore people for 35 minutes like he just bored me. And it would be so much, because one of the things I don't like about success is it separates us from people. And I hate that. I don't want fans. I want friends. I want to close that gap. But at this age, it's hard to close the gap because I've spoken 13,000 times in over 100 countries of the world. Of course I'm a great communicator. If I can't communicate after 13,000 times, go home. Do you know what I'm saying, Ed? You chose the wrong profession. Go home, boy. But what people don't understand, it was the practice. You cannot separate action from success. And you can't separate intentional practice from success. And so after 13,000 times, of course I'm good, because I've been practicing and practicing and practicing. Just like the people that are on the podcast right now, they'll be good too. But if they could have seen me on the front end,
interesting,
it would have helped them, because that's where they are. When you talked about the dimensions of stories, when we tell stories about different times in our life, it does help people see us in another dimension that is very helpful for the learning and the growth. But I don't like the separation that success brings. I abhor it. I wish there was a way to close that gap, because you don't help people when you're separated from people. You only help people when you're beside them and you walk with them, and they can connect with you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you said something to me once. I'll mess the quote up, but I actually quote you when I speak, because I also believe self-deprecation, making fun of yourself, is a great way to connect with people if it's true and sincere, right, when you speak. And I mess the quote up all the time, but I actually quote you in the current version of what I'm talking about. And I quote something you said to me. I quoted incorrectly, but it goes along these lines that, Ed, you said to me, Ed, something like, if you really want to impress people, show them how perfect you are. But if you want to connect with people, reveal to them your imperfections.
Yeah, totally. It's the impress impact. If you want to impress people, talk about your success. If you want to impact them, talk about your failures.
The reason I think that's important is because I think a lot of people think they have to have all these impressive things they've achieved in their life prior to making an impact on people. Now, I do believe you should have some type of a track record and have done something when you're speaking about it. But I don't believe you have to be this tremendous success in order to make an impact. In fact, I think sometimes that your proximity to the audience in terms of how far you are from them in your success, some of that proximity is actually a really good thing, and that success does separate you if you're not careful from the audience. One of the things that you do when you speak, this is subtle, and it's maybe too subtle to share on the podcast, but I watch it in you, and it's something that I think it's probably one of the only other two laws we'll cover, because I want them to get the book. But you use, better than anyone ever, silence when you speak.
Yeah.
You use it. And my stand-up comedian friends always tell me when I speak, Ed, the funny is after the joke's told, it's in the silence. And when I speak, the biggest change in my speaking over the years is my comfort level with silence when I talk. And an amateur speaker or a newer speaker doesn't like silence. They talk too fast and they talk too much, in my opinion. You are the all-time best at the pause and the moment in between the words so that it makes an impact. I make mistakes sometimes, even still to this day, John, where I've made an impact and I go right into the next thing and I don't let that impact sit with the audience long enough. So please talk about that.
Yeah, I'd love to. I call it in the book The Power of the Pause. And I'm very intentional. Let me just say, first of all, in my coaching with people, I find that the hardest thing to coach people in speaking is the pause. And for a long time, I kept asking myself, Ed, why is it that when I share with them that they need to pause more, that they don't do it? And I finally came up with the answer. In fact, when I was writing the book, it finally hit me. The reason that we're uncomfortable when we speak with pausing is the moment I stop, I give up control to the audience.
Very good.
And we subconsciously don't want to give up control. We want to control. We know where we want to go with the speech, and here's where we are. And so we keep talking. I got control. When I stop, all of a sudden, I allow the audience to think. And just like your comedian friends, they're exactly right. That pause is where what they said that was really funny. I'll tell you what the pause does. The pause underlines your words. So when I pause, when I say something like people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. If I pause, wow, the people are on that thought. They're underlining that thought mentally. If I don't pause, I immediately move them on. And what I do is most speakers, they play catch up the whole time. Most speakers get in front of their audience and they speak without pausing, without giving that time for people. And so what happens is the people are trying to catch up with them the whole time, and they're never with them because they're behind them. And if somebody's behind me, whatever I'm saying doesn't have its full effect. So that pause is so huge because it gives the audience a chance. What basically I'm saying is you can catch up with me. I'm going to let you catch up. And then when I pause, and I turn around and I walk back to my bar stool and sit down and then look at them, it's entirely different.
Man.
I remember in school when if the kids were rowdy, what would the school teacher do sometimes? They would just stop talking.
Yeah.
And finally, even the kid that talked the most, all of a sudden everybody's very conscious, nobody's talking, and the teacher got control of the room by not saying anything until everybody got up to speed with her, if that makes sense. And the pause is so powerful for transition. It's a powerful pivoting tool. And I'll tell you what else it does. It allows people to feel emotionally. If we speak fast all the time, they can't feel emotionally the words. And if they can't feel emotionally the words don't have the same impact on them. I'm receiving them mentally, but when I pause, they can digest those words.
Jeez, wow.
And they can put them on the inside. And now all of a sudden, I'm emotionally connected with you, Ed, because you just gave me a chance not only to hear what you said, you gave me a chance to go down inside of me and feel what you said, which is just absolutely huge. And one more thing the pause is just powerful. And I think this is a big miss. I think that when you pause, you give people a chance to hear the whisper. And I'm a person of faith. I'm not trying to throw that on anyone else, but when you say things that are substantial and things that have meat to them and have application to them, if you pause sometimes, what you said, God, the Spirit, whatever, whispers to your heart. In fact, I ask myself when I hear a speaker, did I hear the whisper any time during the speech? And I can only hear the whisper if the speaker lets me have a little time, not long, a couple seconds, just to settle in And here, and you know, Henry Nouwen said, silence is an act of war against the competing voices within us. And I just think, I love that statement. Henry Nouwen was a great thinker, he was a great man. But I love it, and I think it's my responsibility. I want them to hear my voice, but there's a higher voice.
That's a masterclass right there. That's a masterclass.
If I pause, Ed, I give them a shot of hearing the higher voice. And let me tell you this, my voice, they'll forget. The higher voice, they will not forget.
All time right there. All time right there. That's an all-timer. You guys, as someone who does a lot of this, I can tell you right now, that is profound wisdom right there. And something that you feel it. When that higher voice is whispering to you, you feel it. You don't hear it, you feel it. And that's when a speaker has done an unbelievable job, as they get out of the way and let that higher voice make the impact on you.
And that's what you did at L2L when you were with us. That's exactly what you did. I promise you, you've learned the pause. You've learned it. I learned it. I learned it from a beautiful African-American preacher in South Los Angeles in the Watts area. And I would go up and speak for him. We were friends. E.V. Hill was his name. E.V. Hill, he's passed away. And I watched him. And when he got to something that was really important, what he did is the pause also creates great anticipation. And he would get us right to where we were ready to hear this unfolding, unbelievable thought. And I'll never forget. Take a handkerchief, kind of wipe his face, walk around to the other side of the pulpit, lean in, and then deliver it. And I would watch him, and I'd say, oh, I want to be just like that. I never got that good, but I've tried.
It's not that true. Look, I want to say this. I swear to you, I don't want this just to be a love affair with you on the show, but I want everyone to understand this. I learned that from you. And I'm not saying that because he's here. I looked at my speaking. I thought, what is this thing he does? Because John, when he was a little younger, would still stand still most of his speech. Didn't move around a lot. He wasn't a big pacer. He did some. But now when John speaks, he's even better. And oftentimes he's seated most of the time. And I'm like, how does he do this? And it's these unbelievable pauses before a profound statement and after. And he is the best at this. And the reason he's the best at it is because of his faith background. And it is that he does understand that there's a higher voice. And so I got that from you. And it's something, by the way, forget stage speaking, everybody. I do that with my children now when I make a point.
Of course.
I do it with my wife. Yeah. I want to say something and just let it sit there and feel it and not move on to the next thing. It's where I learned it. It's remarkable. A couple more things, because I want to make sure everybody gets the book. So 16lawsofcommunication.com by the single greatest author on, I say thought leader, leadership expert, communication expert, I think life expert. When you get to 76 and you've traveled around the world and impacted millions of people, you become somebody who knows a lot about life. And one of the things, though, that you talk a lot about is preparation. And I think this transcends speaking. But when it comes, I'll let you speak about preparation. It's law number 4 in the book. But for me, one of the areas, if I can be specific, that I see speakers not prepare enough on is actually how they're going to finish their speech. Yeah. So what I watch with speakers is a lot of people, they kind of want to know what they're going to say first, because that's the thing they're the most nervous about. I got to walk out. What am I going to say first? And I think sometimes some people know what they're going to say in the middle, like what's the point? Yeah. But I watch, and I want you to talk about preparation overall, but maybe at the end tie this to it. I don't know if you've noticed this. Number one thing I see is someone's done a pretty good job and they don't know how to finish. And they keep talking and they keep talking and they talk themselves out of the great whisper because they didn't really get to the end of their preparation and how they were going to finish. Or they think, I have to finish on a bang, you know. Yeah. And a lot of my comedian friends even say, hey, man, the last joke doesn't have to be the funniest. It just has to be the last joke.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious as to your message about preparation, and if you have any agreements with me, especially about the end.
Yeah, I do. First of all, you want to always have integrity with your audience by being prepared. I think what an injustice to people who came and sometimes spent money and gave time, and you walk out there half-cocked and not ready to deliver what I mean. That's just there's no reason for that. So we're all assuming in this communication talk that you're going in at least at your very best preparation possible. Okay, whatever that is. You're right on the front end because all is well that begins well. And so we want to get it started. So what's the story I want to say? We all got that. But there's a difference between good coaches and great coaches, and there's a good difference between good speakers and great speakers. And here it is. Good coaches have a pregame plan. You know, they when they get ready for the game, they've laid it out. Here's the first 8 offensive plays. These are the 5 first. You know, they have it all laid out. Good coaches have a pregame plan, but great coaches make halftime adjustments. It's the great coaches come out different the second half with their team because they've watched the team. They've watched their team. They've watched that. Oh my gosh, I didn't see that coming. I didn't know they were going to be using that type of an offense as much. So at halftime, they're doing a lot of adjusting. They may have it, but let me tell you something. You can't adjust what you don't know. So the big miss is we make adjustments, but we don't know where to go. We just know that it wasn't working. And so when something doesn't work, what does a person do? They talk more. They think, well, if I keep talking, maybe I'll talk myself into something or talk myself out of something or talk them into something. And so nervousness is, well, I just keep talking. And you're, like you said, Ed, we're saying, come on, close it. You know, you're losing your audience down that process. So the halftime adjustments in communication, you're out there. I mean, I've got my lessons, my teaching, I've got it all out there. But I'm also aware that while I speak, the audience is going to all of a sudden latch onto a part of something. And maybe I thought, oh, I didn't have a clue that's going to connect with them so well. Now my ability to stay there. But you can't stay there if you don't have experience and material. So you have to have. My father, you know, the word Maxwell is a Scottish word, and it really comes from having filling the well up to the max, a full well. And my father also was a speaker, communicator, and was working full time at 95, passed away at 98. But the process was, and he said, John, always have your well full. He said, always have more to deliver than you can deliver, because you don't know what's going to always work the best. But once you find it work, if you've overdone, now bring some more of that stuff, bring that excess in there and just fill that pipeline and stay there as long as you possibly can. And I think that's a big mess. Now, that only comes by experience.
Yeah.
This is not something that you do the first time you speak. Right. The first time you speak, you're just wanting to finish. You know what I'm saying, and be done and go home. But through experience. As far as the ending is concerned, in the book, I think one of my favorite parts about the book was what I call the 4 F's of awareness. When you look at the audience, there are 4 words that they start with an F that you have to constantly be aware while you're teaching. And the first one is, how does my audience feel? I want to. How do they feel? How do they feel? Do they feel like they're happy and excited? And do they have? Are they already leaning in? Are they laid back? Are they, are they a bunch of people saying, I'm not really sure even why I'm here, but how they feel? I want to find out how you feel. Then I go to that second F. If I can find out how you feel, Ed, and I can say, you know what, I have felt the same way. Oh my gosh, he knows what I'm thinking. He knows what I'm feeling. He understands me. He understands me. So how does the audience feel? What are they feeling? Have I felt the same way? And then that third F is, and let me tell you what I found that worked for me. This worked for me. I'm not saying it worked for you, but it did work for me. So let me at least share with you, and so that now you tell them kind of what you've learned, and then you use the fourth F is, and I think that I can help you find the answer too. And the moment that you get those four F's and you're working those four F's where you're teaching, you follow me? It works. It just works.
Yes. By the way, I do that when I'm in a disagreement with somebody. I'll say, listen, I know how you feel. I felt the same way myself. But what I found was, what I don't add, but what I have not added was the fourth F. And I've never heard that in my life before, which is, I think I can find it.
I think I help you find the answer. It gives them hope.
You are the best in the world. I want to ask you, I'm going to take you off script, off the book for a second. Like now it's me and you.
Yeah.
By the way, go to 16lawsofcommunication.com and you will get the master class on becoming a great communicator from the master. By the way, in his prime, he's better than he's ever been. And I've watched John speak now as a student many, many years ago, as somebody who's spoken on the same stage as him, and then recently even in the audience watching him again. He's just incredible. But just like a life thing, I'm just curious. You get to this stage of your life, I feel like there's like and I didn't even know I was going to ask you this today, but I just feel like I watch you and you're so joyful and happy. I feel like there's a happiness deficiency in the world. So this has nothing to do with the book.
Yeah.
Maybe it does. Maybe people don't communicate well enough with one another, and that's part of the deal. What have you found over 76 years that brings you the most happiness? In other words, in a life well lived, which you're still in the prime of, you're probably going to live far past where your dad lived, which means you'll live into the hundreds. But in a really well-lived life, like what's brought you the most happiness? If you could share that with the, I've never asked you that on the show before, and you're such a happy, joyful person. Has it been your work, your faith, your something specific? What would you say to that?
Well, first of all, there is not a simplistic answer. It is all those things being part of the context. You're with me, but to give you the answer that you're wanting something that's a little definitive, the answer is what keeps me in the game. And what brings me so much joy is the people that I add value to and I help. I mean, every day, think how fortunate I am. Every day, books I write, things I teach, help people. And so when people say, well, how do you stay motivated? I mean, aren't you tired? Don't you get tired? Well, of course, we're human. We all get tired. But what keeps you in the game? I mean, I don't need to be in the game. I mean, I'm blessed, okay? I don't need to be in the game. You don't need to be in the game. You have money. I have money. And so I'm not in it. But I'm in it because I'm making a positive difference in people's lives. And I can't think of, if there's something better than that, somebody's going to tell me, so I can go that way too. But you know, I mean, I have two wonderful homes. I live on golf courses. But there has to be something better and bigger than what is my tea time today. I mean, there just has to. Do I enjoy? I love to play golf. Want to play some more golf with you? Oh, I love to play golf. There has to be something. You have to live beyond yourself, Ed. You know when we talked about get over myself? Yeah. Success is about me. Significance is about others. And I live in the significant world. I've already had success. You have all the. We don't. I don't mean this unkindly. I've got all I need. But now I've got so much to give, and I think. And one other thing is, I'm still growing. I'm still curious. I'm still asking questions. I'm still taking notes. I'm still learning. I'm sitting at the feet of people like you, and I'm getting better. And I think that is huge. My father, when he was 92. We were having lunch one day, and he said, John, I just want you to know, I think my best days are still ahead of me. And he's 92. Well, how could he say that? He's still growing. He's still learning. So I think growth is happiness. I think when people are growing, they're very. And then I think significance, living for others, is fulfilling. Wow. So I think when I put the personal growth of I'm a student and I'm teachable and I'm still learning, with the fact that I'm still helping and adding value to people, and you put those two together. And by the way, if you're not growing, you can't keep adding value to people. This is the big miss. I mean, you can't write 90 books or 88 books or whatever it is. If you're not still learning and growing. I mean, you get one book, one song. You know, remember Debbie Boone, and she had, You Light Up My Life? I'm telling my age. You probably don't even remember that.
I know who Debbie Boone is. I'm probably showing my age.
Yeah. Well, Debbie Boone had one hit, and it was like a hit for like #1 for 6 months. It was just, it rained. It was huge. But it was the only one she ever had. Well, after you've heard Debbie sing that 50 times, you want to say, Debbie, is there another song? And the answer is no, there's not another song. Right. And I love the song, love you, Debbie. Yeah. But I got that song down. Is there another? If you're not growing, you only have one song. You only have one talk. You only have one book. But how do I keep adding value to people? I keep learning and growing myself. And basically what I do is what I learn, I just pass on to people as quickly as I can. That is fulfilling.
I'm just curious. I think when people hear that, they think, hey, you say in the book, anybody can transform their life. But does that really apply to me? Can anyone actually change their world? And I'd like you to speak to that to begin.
And I love the question. And I think that here's where the miss is. I think that most of the time when we're talking about positive change, we leave it to others because we really don't think that we're probably capable of doing it. And in fact, I call the book Change Your World, not Change the World. Change the world's too big. It's overwhelming. So I'm just asking people to go into their world. I mean, your family, your friends, maybe a few people that you work with, but I'm asking them to go into that world and become a positive influence, positive force with the people around them. And what really excites me about the book and our time together today is that the book has no theory in it. It's all proven work. I'm not throwing out a book and saying, I think maybe if we did this, that we could change our world. And I'm not hyping people or, pie in the sky stuff. We're not going to Disneyland today. It's just stuff that it works. And I know it works because I've been able to see it firsthand. I've been able to lead it. And to be able to put a book like this in the hands of any person and have them not have a false promise, but have a true promise that they can really make a difference with someone else is just an incredible feeling. So I can say, I've written 86 books, so that's a few. And by the way, that's hey, Ed, when you think about it, that's no big deal. I mean, you've got to be
sure
old. You've got to be old. If you're not old, you can't write 86 books. So I tell people, relax, take a pill. It's not that big of a deal. You just have to be old to do 86 books. But of the 86 books that I've done, this one is the most fulfilling. Yeah, it's a timely book. It's very timely. But I'm very excited because what do leaders do, Ed? Leaders offer hope in the darkest hour.
Yeah.
And honestly, when crisis comes, you separate the players from the pretenders real quick. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so we're in a crisis, and I'm giving an opportunity for all of us to be players. And
I noticed, John, I noticed that, by the way, on the book. I was going to ask you that. It didn't say change the world. It said change your world. That was one of the things I actually wanted to ask you about. And so you kind of started out there. And like most of John's books, guys, it goes right into the granular, like, here's what you do. And on that hope topic, you have this great term in there called a possibilist. You need to become a possibilist. Yeah. What is that? Explain.
Don't you love that word? Huh?
I love it. I love it.
It took me about a month to learn how to say it. So let's start there.
I got it out of the way early in the interview. I'm like, I'm going to say this correctly early.
Yeah, I could write it before I could say it, but I love it because what this possibilist is a person who doesn't deny reality. I mean, they don't have their head in the sand. They don't say they're not just an optimist and everything's good and everything's going to come out okay without any kind of substantial support to their statement. A possibilist sees reality, sees the downside, but also sees the possibility. And by the way, I think that's what a leader is. I think a leader sees reality. And in fact, Max Dupree says the first responsibility of a leader, Ed, is to define reality. So we don't do our people a favor when we leave reality. And in fact, I think reality is the foundation of building a dream. I watch people try to build a dream without reality, and I want to walk into their life and say it's not going to happen. You've got to, the foundation of reality is what is solid. Now you can build something off of it. And a possibilist is a person who says,
this is a very difficult time, and this is not going to be easy, and it's not going to be quick, and it's not going to be even sometimes simple, but it can happen, and I'm not only believe it can happen, but I'm going to make it happen. And in other words, a possibilist gets involved. It's awful easy to be an optimist on the sideline, but when you've got to go in the game, all of a sudden, that optimism isn't going to show anything in your game. You've got to be able to provide the resources and support to make the game a winner for you. So I love the word because it says we're not going to deny reality, but we're also going to not deny possibility.
Yeah.
And you know, some people, they go to reality and lose possibility, and some people go to possibility and lose reality. A possibilist says, I take both of them with me. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. I've not heard it said that way, because I talk a lot about operating out of your imagination and not your memory or your history. I think a lot of people just keep operating out of their memory and their history. They don't give themselves the gift of being what I call a possibility thinker. And I love possibilist. It's so beautiful, because now what you've added to that, though, that is really valid, is you also have to define reality. I think a lot of times these, you know, you got to dream big, you got to have possibilities, but defining where you are is the place you're going to begin. And what I love about the book, actually for me, I'm trying to, in my life, you know, I have different businesses. And so as I was reading the book, I'm like, this really applies to turning around this one particular part of my life and my business. And I was fascinated because John lays foundations, guys. It's steps in this book. And I thought it was interesting that really you start sort of with values, and that's sort of the foundation of transformation. I think this is valuable because if you've been hurt through what's going on in the economy right now and in the world, and you're like, where the heck do I begin to turn my world around? John recommends you start with getting clear again on your values. So talk about that a little bit, John, because it's beautiful. And I not read that anywhere else.
Well, Ed, thanks for bringing that up. And, you know, if it's okay, I would like to give all of your people a behind the scenes. It's not in the book at all. Okay. But I'd like to give context. I'd like to pull back the curtain for a moment.
Yeah.
Because I got to go clear back to 2002. And if you go back there, I mean, if you picked up the Time magazine in 2002, they summarized that year as the year of distrust. Because all I got to do is say Enron, okay? Yeah. That was the year when corporate scandals were rampant, and what we said we were and what we were was not the same thing, and employees got hurt and clients got hurt and corporations just went belly up and all kind of bad things happened. I was writing at that time for Time Warner, and Larry Kirschbaum, who was the CEO of the book division of Time Warner, called me up to New York City. We had a long dinner, and he said, John, I want you to write a book on business ethics for us. We just really need this voice in America right now. And I told him, I said, I can't. And he said, why can't you? I said, because there's no such thing as business ethics. And he looks at me and he said, what do you mean? Look what's happening in the business world. I said, I know, I understand that, but there's still no such thing as business ethics. Wow. I said, there's just ethics. Just ethics. It's not business ethics. It's not home ethics. It's not community ethics. It's not relationship. It's ethics. And either you have them or you don't. And by the way, if you have them, they work in business. Oh, happy day. Okay, yeah. We're cooking. You with me? Yeah. Yeah. So he gets it real quick. And he said, oh, I got it. He said, well, can you write a book on ethics? And I said, I'm not sure. He said, okay, you're holding back on me again. What are you doing? And I said, how do you write a book? I mean, ethics is all about doing the right thing for the right reason, regardless of the situation. I said, how can you write a book on ethics when there's no truth or absolutes? I mean, in a world of relativism, how do you get anything substantial? And I said, you're going to have to give me a little time to see if I can write the book on it. And so I went away with my research writing team. We talked about it a lot. And we finally came up with an answer. So I wrote the book on ethics. And the answer was very simple. We wrote the book based on the golden rule. Yeah. Treat other people as you'd like to be treated yourself.
Beautiful.
And our research team found out that every religion in the world and every culture in the world has the golden rule. So it's not like I'm telling them something they don't already know or probably haven't even embraced. So we wrote that book, and it was a game
changer. I mean, I was interviewed by the Chicago Tribune, Wall Street Journal. I went to West Point. I mean, I went to places and they said, talk to us about, and all of a sudden the light turned on in my life. And I realized back in 2002 that the golden rule was just nothing more than a good value. This is a good value. Treat others as you want to be treated. It's a good value. All of a sudden I thought good values can make us become good people if we learn them and if we live them. And so I began to, although I trained leadership skills and everybody knows that, I develop leaders. I got that part. I said, I want to do more than help people with leadership skills. I want to help people not only be trained leaders, I want to help them be transformational leaders.
Very good.
And transformation is an inside job. It's a values issue. And it's one thing. Okay, let me give you an example. I'm known for the statement, everything rises and falls on leadership.
Yep.
Well, that's the good and the ugly, the good and the bad of leadership. Rises or falls. You got a bad leader, it falls, good leader, falls. Now, what makes leadership rise, Ed? Two things. Competence. In other words, you have to be a good leader, and good values. And you can't divorce them. You're not going to rise if you have great skills, but you have terrible values.
Yeah. And
if you have great values, but you have terrible skills, you can't lead anybody. I mean, the good news is they're a friend, but they aren't going to take you anywhere. and so the falls on leadership is when you have bad values and you have bad leadership skills. And so all of a sudden I realized that here we've been training people to lead in leadership skills, and we train them on what to do, and they know how to do the right thing, but we haven't trained them to be right. Wow. We haven't trained them to be the right person.
I felt like, John, I didn't mean to jump in, but I feel like it's one of the revolutionary parts of the book is the part on transformation tables, is that you make change in groups. And it made me think a couple of things, guys, on values. As I read the book and I did the values assessment myself, I think one of the reasons for all of you that are trying to make change, I think if you want it to be long-term, start different this time. Start with your values. That's the foundation that'll be everlasting. I mean, your values will evolve, obviously, over time. But the other thing that happens when you take inventory of your values, I think, and it helped me, is I've been talking a lot lately about you've got to believe you're worthy of success. You got to give yourself more credit for your intentions. Not enough. I think everyone predicates, I could be successful, as you said, when I'm completely ready, or when I've got all the answers, or I've got this amazing ability to execute. Well, how about you deserve the win because you're a good human, because you intend to make a difference? There's a lot to be said in this world right now for just somebody with great intentions, and not enough good people give themselves credit for having good intentions, delivering on their self-confidence, because they don't take an inventory of it. And then when you sit at these transformation tables he talks about, you'll discuss them, but I think it begins to grow within you. And so I just think there's so many granular things like that in the book. You also talk in the book, John, you don't have to list them all if you don't want to, but I just think his stuff is so real. There's like eight streams of influence that you talk about and why they're necessary for transformation. If you want to go through all 8, you're welcome to, but if you could at least make some reference to it, I just feel like it'd be so valuable for someone watching this right now or taking notes, or maybe they're about to pull over to the side of the road so they can write these down.
The reason I love to be on your show is you know how to bring the best out of the person you interview. You're a master at it. You really are, Ed. You're a pro. And I'll go to the 8 streams, but when you talked about people with good intentions, that all of a sudden we give them courage. We let people that have had good intentions and a good heart out of the closet.
Yeah.
We let them. We say, you can get out of the closet. You don't have to stay there anymore. And we're going to give you a simple game plan and you don't have to start big. Do you have 5 friends? Do you have 4 friends? Do you have 3 friends that you'd be willing to get together with and just work through these values? And I just love what you said, because I thought to myself, wow, I wish I would have written it as good as you said it, as far as we just really help people who really would like to make a difference, but have never had the courage or the confidence.
Yeah.
The thing, it's always kind of been somebody else is going to have to make a difference. I'm just going to hope and pray for it.
Right.
And all of a sudden, no, you can walk out of the closet now and you can start doing it.
It's beautiful.
And so that transformation, that magic happens there. We may come back to the table a little bit, because interaction, hearing other people discuss their difficulties and issues just really helps bring everybody out.
Let's stay there for a second, John. I think it's too valuable. So it reminded me almost like if you go to church, there's
you know, you go to church every Sunday, but then sometimes there's like a small group
Yes.
where you sit around in fellowship and you'll share a scripture and discuss it, and then it grows and you come back. I think it's, you're right. Let's just finish that for a second. What is a transformation table specifically, and how do I begin to build one?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, there's a small group of people. You know, 6, 8. You can get up to 10, but don't, you know, keep it small. Keep it small. And it's a place where everybody roots for everybody. There's no judgment there. We don't need any teachers there. We don't even call them. They're facilitators. There's one person that may say, "Okay, you share next," but it's we're in this together, and all we're wanting to do is improve each other. And so it's one for all for one. You can call us the 6 musketeers around the transformation table, or whatever you want to call it. But here's what's beautiful. Here's why the table works, Ed. There are 3 questions that people ask that if they can get those answered, it brings life change to them. And they always ask it about somebody that's leading them, okay? And these are the 3. When I spoke at the United Nations a few years ago, when I did the opening session at the United Nations to all the ambassadors of the world, I spent 2 hours on these 3 questions. But these are the 3. Every follower asks a leader basically these 3 questions. Now, they don't ask them personally, but intuitively, they're following for a reason. And the reason is they're looking at that person, whoever it is that's leading, and they're asking the questions. First of all, do you care for me? Yeah. Secondly, can you help me? And thirdly, can I trust you? Those are the 3 questions. In the table, here's what makes the transformation table magic. Those 3 questions are answered every time you meet. This is life change. And when I'm teaching, those 3 questions can be asked, but I can't answer them to a crowd. Yeah. When I'm reading it, when I'm writing a book, they can pick up the book and they can be reading it. But those 3 questions can't be answered at long distance on a page. Yeah. You can put people around the table, Ed, and all of a sudden, the trust factor begins to increase. Because people begin to be vulnerable. But trust is built out of vulnerability. It's not built out of covering. And authenticity is essential. And all of a sudden, you've got people helping each other. And you don't have professionals helping each other. You have friends helping each other. Yeah. And let me tell you something. The difference between a professional help is they'll tell you what you need to know. A friend help will say, "I'll walk with you."
Wow, that's great. Yeah.
Oh, that was so good. I'm so glad I got Aaron in this room to get this content for me. I got my content curator in here, and it just becomes absolutely life-changing.
Fire.
And I want you to know it's like social trust. Social trust. Every country that does well, every community does well, Ed, has social trust. And any country that doesn't do well lacks it. And social trust is I trust you. I trust you to do what you ought to do most of the time. Wow. And when there's distrust, I don't trust you to do what you ought to do most of the time. And if you can see, we've got a trust fall in America right now, a major trust fall.
No question.
And somebody needs to speak about this issue. Now watch it. This is huge. We have got a trust fall. And we're looking at each other and we're saying, "Oh my gosh!" And it's we're divided. It's you and against me, and we got our issues and the whole and we've totally lost our way. Around the table, that all disappears. You've got people that are friends, and they're saying, "Well, let me tell you what happened with me in that area," and you've got support. I mean, it's like AA meetings. I mean, there's a reason that they've worked for decades. There's a reason. There's a community at a table that you can get nowhere else. And so what we've watched is, as we've now put Ed 2.5 million people through these tables. So I mean, it's not like we tried a table last week and we wrote a book about it.
Right. We think it might work. Yeah.
And we have story after story of life change. And the life change comes when people just are sitting around that table and they're finding out, yes, you care for me. Yes, you are helping me. And oh, yes, I do trust you. And now there is a safe place for people to have change, because change is not easy. You referred to that earlier when, people change when they heard enough they have to, they see enough that they're inspired to, they learn enough that change is not easy. But around the table, change is as easy as it's ever going to come.
Yeah.
Because you're not doing it by yourself. And that's it's huge. So exciting.
It's huge. You said, by the way, what you established at that table is social trust in that community. And guys, listen, we're just getting in here. We've already talked about the fact, yes, you can make transformation. Yes, you need to be a possibilist. Yes, it starts with your values. The way you go out and do that is you go out and create one of these transformation tables. These are real applicable things you can do right now that can begin to create the transformation in your world. These are real things. John, I read the book, and there's a group of kind of, influencers, I guess you call them, that are friends of mine, that we've all sort of said, hey, let's get together one-on-one. And I actually took the transformational table concept. And next Friday, I'm doing that with a group of men and women that are in this group. And I said, I want to begin to build my own transformation table. I'm not the leader of it. I want it to be a community. And I said to them, actually, ironically, that I wanted to build social trust. And I've learned the 3 keys of leadership from John Maxwell. When you guys hear me talk about those 3 keys, now you know where I got them. So, I'm coachable to John on these things because I know, and by the way, when I think of John, I think of values. When I think of someone who sustained a career this long, that so many of us that are in this space look to as somebody that we admire, that's had sustaining impact and value like John has, it's because of these reasons. These are the reasons why I love John. So he's being humble, but he's lived many of these things for years and years and years, which is why he's who he is. So I interrupted you on the 8 streams of influence because the transformation table is so dadgum good. But I know that's one of the things after values that's necessary for transformation. So let's at least give them the gift of that wisdom as well.
Yeah, I will. And by the way, because you keep saying things that trigger me. It's your fault that we don't get to the 8 streams because it's your fault, Ed. Because let me just say something. I have fulfillment in accomplishing things that I can do. But I have much greater fulfillment, multiplied fulfillment in helping other people accomplish things that they've never done before. And that's why Change Your World is so exciting to me, because I've got this down. I've done transformation tables. I'll keep doing transformation tables. Margaret and I took a cruise about 18 months ago, a Disney cruise, a great Disney cruise with our grandchildren. And every day we went through another value. We finished the Disney cruise. We go to 4 different countries. We got Mickey. We got Goofy. We got them all running around. We've got them in the parade. We've got them doing everything. I sit down, I say, okay, because I always do this at the end of a trip. I always ask my kids, my grandkids, what did you love? What did you learn?
Wow, so good.
Always. Because experience isn't the best teacher. It's evaluated experience. Okay. All 5 of my grandchildren, what did you love? Goofy, Mickey Mouse, parade. Papa, we love sitting around the table with you and Mimi and learning values and discussing them. I mean, these little kids would get around. I'm talking about all my kids are teenagers. They would get around. I remember that. I'll never forget the moment when John, my number 3 grandchild, in one of the values, was very open and honest about a very difficult time he was going through. And the next thing I knew, his cousins and his sister and his brother were around him, and they had their arms around him, and they were loving on him, and they decided to pray for him.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Life-changing.
Life-changing.
Life-changing. It can only happen at the table. Okay, now.
Wow.
It never, I so 8 streams of influence.
I knew we would do this again. I knew it.
Well, it's magic. It's your fault, Ed. I've had to help interviewers finish their program.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm with you. I just sit there and I say, jump in, and the flow, Ed's flow will take you wherever you want to go. And you do it so well. But leadership, everything rises and falls on leadership. So in every community, in every country, there are 8 streams of influence. This is just well documented, and we've got it down. Government, business, education, media, arts, family, religion, and health. Okay, now, these are the 8 streams of influence. We only go into the country when we get permission from the top of those people. And here's what's key. So the president says, we want you to come in. We say, well, to the president, will you and your cabinet go through transformation tables? When the Supreme Court justice, I say, now will you and your will you start a transformation table? And we go right to the top. And if they won't, we vet countries and we don't go because they won't. Here's what we found. I have 7 companies, but one of my companies is a leadership training company. And here's what we discovered. This is huge. The major difference between success and failure in a company when we're doing leadership training with them, there's one indicator, and we can tell it on day one whether they're going to make it or not. There's one indicator of whether it's going to be successful or not. And here it is. When the leaders buy into the program and they go to the program themselves, it's going to be successful.
Interesting.
If they have the program, pay all the money and resources, and send their people, it's not going to go. People do what people see. And so the buy-in is the fact that in those 8 streams, at the very top, they say yes and they get involved. Now, what does influence do? Influence just filters down through the whole country and through the whole culture.
Very good.
And so what, no matter what stream your listeners are with me on right today, no matter what stream they're in, this really works. And I'm going to give you one example. I could give you 100, but I'm going to give you one. In Guatemala, we've been doing transformation tables, teaching values to the 2nd largest bank in the country. It has 10,000 employees. Okay, so it's a big bank. So the CEO, after they've done this for 2 years, the CEO asked me to come down. He said, I have 2,000 of our clients that I'm bringing together, and I want you to talk to them about change your world and transformation tables and values. Because he said, it's so changed our company. I want to help our clients. And so I said I would. So he introduces me, 2,000 clients out there. And here's what he says. For 2 years, we've been doing transformation tables in our business. 3 positive outcomes. Number 1, our bottom line, the profit, better than it's ever been before. In fact, he said it increased 36% last year. Now, why did the bottom line do so well? We teach values, hard work, industry, honesty, integrity, teamwork. His employees are learning all these values, and all of a sudden they start to live them and embrace them. Now, bottom line profit, number 1. Number 2, he said, we now have a leadership culture in our company. He said, we didn't have a leadership culture here.
There you go.
He said, and where did they get their leaders? In the tables. Because, Ed, if you and I are at a table, 1 week you'll facilitate that table and you'll take whatever value that comes up. Next week the person beside you facilitates it, and we pass the leadership baton around. And how do you develop leaders? By practicing leaders. How do you know you have leaders? By watching them practice.
Very good.
And he said all of a sudden leaders are popping up. He said we have more leaders now than we have positions for them. Now that's a pleasant thing to have. Number 3, and this is the one that really got me.
So good.
He said the families of our employees have beautifully changed. What are they doing? They're taking those values they've learned at work. And by the way, every week, 45 minutes, the banks all shut down. We do the tables on bank time. Hey, they go home to their families, say, here's what we're discussing this week. It bleeds right into the families, and all of a sudden the family gets better.
So good.
That's why I love what this work. This is, okay, I wrote a book, but I'm wanting to create a movement.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm passionate about. And movements don't start with a mass. They start with them few. Mass movements never start with a mass. When Gandhi left prison and started going to by the time he got to the sea, he had 1 million, but he only had 6 with him in the beginning. So hey, he just had 1 transformation table in the beginning. Yeah. And by the time he got there, he had 1 million. And we think we have the possibility through this book to start a positive movement of values, learning, living, and embracing, and that's going to be fun.
And the way that you do it, John, is worth. See, I think watching what John's doing, not only in the content, but the way in which he's creating the movement. So for me, I don't always just watch the execution. I also watch the person executing. I shouldn't say executioner, but the person doing the executing. And one of the things you talk about in the book, and I want people to go read the book, so we'll only cover 1 or 2 more things in it. But the truth is, you talk about moving from me to we. Yeah. And that's, I think so many leaders unknowingly still sort of make what's happening about them. And they're not cognizant enough of making it about the we.
And I don't think any great movement has ever happened without a cause. And I don't know that enough business leaders are aware of turning their business into a cause. And for me, I've done that in business. But when I read the book, I'm like, have I done that in my family? I'm the leader of my family. What's the cause of our family? What's our family's mission? That's why what you just said about the cruise really made an impact on me. So can you just speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll be glad to, because I think that Stephen Covey said, begin with the end in mind. Yeah. And when I wrote Intentional Living, it was the whole deal is most people accept their life instead of lead their life. Yeah. And so when we talk about this movement and what we're trying to create, first of all, it starts with credibility. A cause without credibility won't go anywhere. I know a lot of people, they have really good values and a really good cause, but they're not credible. They can't say, but we've done it. And if I haven't done it, all I can do is tell. Yeah. But when I've done it, I can show and tell. Oof. And show and tell is about 100 to 1 more powerful than just tell. And so, when a lot of times books are tell, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I loved what you said about your imagination a while ago. And I think so many people cut themselves short because they don't allow their imagination to take them to where their potential could be. But what I do know is this, that in the cause has to be a positive cause that adds value to people. Let me just say, you can't sustain a movement out of negativity. We've got a lot of negativity in our country right now. No question. You can't sustain negativity. People wear out with there's only I could only curse the darkness so long. Yeah. I mean, until now I've cursed the darkness and it's really dark and we've cursed a lot and nothing's happened. Hey, this book is quit cursing the darkness and go turn on the light. Oh, gosh, this is a turn on the light book. This is a turn on the light movement. In other words, you've got to be for something. The moment that you're for something, catch this, adds value to the people. Mm. This is not a movement that adds value to me. When you talked about me to we a moment ago, Ed, you're so right on, my friend. You're so right on. The vision never is sustaining if it's about me. I mean, if I'm saying, hey, Ed, join my team. Hey, come on get into my coaching company. Hey, get on my leadership train. Well, how many my's do you need to hear before you sit there and say, boy, I think I'm John Slave here. I think, no. It's the first thing that has to happen is that you've got to take the vision from me to we. Ed, the vision works when all of a sudden you're not talking about John Maxwell's book. Mm-hmm. When you go to your friends, you say, let me tell you something. This book helped me. Now, it's contagious. It now has legs. It's not like, well, John has a book out here. No. They don't care about John Maxwell. They care about the fact that it's helped you. Now that it's helped you, there's a difference between being a vision caster and being a vision carrier.
What's
casting
the difference?
Vision, you can just cast, well, this is good. I'll throw that out, cast that out. Here we go. The moment you're a carrier, you cast the vision because of who you are. You're so stinking contagious that everybody catches it. They catch it because you won't let them not catch it. You won't shut up about it. And why? Because it's you. It's changed you. And all of a sudden, it's made a difference in Ed's life, not Maxwell's life. It's not about me. It's all about you. And when you go to your group, Friday night, and you go bring that book and you start sharing what it's helping you do, all of a sudden, they're in the game. They're in the game. Okay,
I'm listening to you. I'm just thinking, you're such a treasure. I don't mean to just, I'm just speaking what I feel when I talk with you. And I'm curious, John, so by the way, what you just said, I have to just add one thing to it. I recently interviewed Martin Luther King III. And we were talking obviously a lot about his dad create just this little movement, only one of the greatest movements in the last 100 years, probably arguably the greatest movement in the last 100 years. And I was golfing this week with a buddy of mine, and he goes, Martin Luther King was awesome. He was against racism. I said, that's not right. He was for equality. He was for justice. He was for unity. You don't create a movement that lasts this long being against something. There's nothing wrong with having an adversary that you're against. But Jesus Christ's great movement wasn't just against the adversary. It was for our salvation. If you're a person of faith, that's what endures. And so I just want to second that. But when I look at you, we are going to talk about John Maxwell for a second. I'm listening to this man who's been at this for more than 1 decade, put it mildly. And I'm watching him at the top of his game. I've known him a while. I haven't read every one of the 86 books, but I've read a lot of them. Way before we met, you all heard me singing the praises of John Maxwell. And I'm watching him, I'm like, he's better than he's ever been. Is there something that you could impart to all of us about, you're on the top of your game?
Yeah,
how do you do that to sustain that level of, what's the mechanism that drives you to stay at this level or even keep getting better?
I love the questions you ask. I mean, you go right to my heart every time. First of all, I am getting better. I am at the top of my game. Now, I turned 74 on Saturday, February 20th. So I turned 74. So, okay, now get this. And I'm in my best days. But my best days today are because when I was in my 20s, I had a mentor share with me that growth was not automatic, that if I was going to personally grow, I was going to have to dig for it and be intentional in it. And that getting older is automatic, getting better is not. And so once I understood the difference, I said, okay, I've got to get a game plan for my personal growth. And I did. And my game plan for personal growth over the years has been quite simple. It deals around REAL, relationships, equipping, attitude, and leadership. And if you'll read my books, almost all my books are either in relationship, equipping, attitude, or leadership category. And I did that because I came to the conclusion at 27 that if I could teach people how to do those 4 things really well, they could pretty much be successful in any kind of venture that they have. Because, I mean, if you're good with people relationally, if you know how to equip people and build yourself a team, if you got an attitude that can handle COVID-19 and adversity, and if you can lead and influence people, pretty much you're in the game of success. So I said every day I'm going to learn how to relate better, equip better, attitude better, lead better. I'm going to live in this world. And I didn't become goal-oriented. I became more values-oriented. And I think this is a difference. Now, I'm not opposed to goal-oriented at all. Yeah. But let me tell you something. If you're growth-oriented, you'll hit all your goals.
That's right.
But if you're goal-oriented and not growth-oriented, every time you hit a goal, you know what you do? You go to the game, what's next? Okay, now what do? I just made this much money. Oh, my gosh. I got this position. And, okay, I bought that house. Now what do I do? And to take the what do I do out of your life, just begin to grow. Now, stay right with me. What happens because I grow and have done this for, we're about 50 years now on it. I have increased my growth capacity. This is where people miss. My growth capacity is humongous. It's like going to the gym. Hey, you increase physical capacity. It's like reading. You increase mental capacity. Well, I've increased growth capacity. My growth capacity is much larger than most people's. Not because I'm smarter than most people. It's because I've been doing it for 50 years. I've got a long runway now. So my growth capacity allows me to grow more, faster, and compound it more than other people. Because consistency compounds.
Yeah.
So at this stage of the game, everything I touch gets bigger and better, but it's because my capacity is growing. Now, put on top of that, I don't think there's a finish line. So I'm not running a finite game. Now, Simon Sinek wrote a great book called The Infinite Game. It's a phenomenal book. He's a good friend. And it's a great game. And basically, Simon, I'm going to write a book. And I was already going to write it before Simon's. And now I told Simon I'm going to write it and just make it better than his. But I'm going to write a book. I'm kidding. He's a phenomenal writer. I'm going to write a book entitled, Is There a Finish Line?
Oh, so good.
And Ed, for most people, the answer is yes. Most people have what I call a self-imposed finish line. When I get to this age, I'm going to quit. When I make this much money, I'm going to quit. And so they put their lines out there. Now, if I put a finish line out there, I'm 74. I'm going to quit. I'm not going to work anymore. Okay, whatever. What people don't understand is when you cross that self-imposed finish line, guess what? You're finished.
You're finished.
It's over. But if you live with no finish line, it's never over. What does that do? That keeps me in the game.
Wow.
It keeps me excited about what's happening because I'm never going to finish. I'm going to die, but I'm never going to finish. By the way, when I came into the game was already started. I didn't start the game. And it's not, hey, it's certainly going to not end when I leave. I mean, I tell people when they think that they're indispensable, I say die and just find out how good we get along without you. I mean, oh my gosh, nobody's indispensable. So it's okay. But what this allows me to do is it allows me to stay fresh. It allows me to ask questions. It allows me to stay curious because I understand my growth capacity is great and I'm playing in a game that never is finished.
I got to tell you, John, in my career doing this, that's one of my favorite answers of all time, of anything I've ever asked somebody. And for all of you leaders out there, wow, not having a finish line. I put a couple in my life on myself, self-imposed finish lines. And as I got closer to them, they just evaporated and I just quit doing it. Now I've sort of decided to be the way that you are. But the other thing that gives you hope is that as you work on growing yourself, you increase your capacity to grow even more. I've never heard that said before. I've never heard that said before. But that's more fire, because I have experienced that, with trying to keep my humility, but I've experienced that in my own life. Like my capacity to grow exponentially is much greater now than it was even 10 years ago because I've been growing. And I never really thought, I think we think the reverse. Well, I've grown so much, there's just not that much more to go. But it's the reverse. That's brilliant.
It's totally the reverse. The more you grow, the more you have to grow. The more it's like the more you know. The more you know, you know what? The more you know you don't know.
That's so true.
The only people that think they know something are people who know nothing.
That's so true.
And the only people that think that they've all stopped growing are people that never grew.
It's so true. Is there something? Let me ask you a very hard question. Go ahead. Can I ask you a hard question?
Well, I may not be able to answer it, but you can ask it.
What did you, all through all this growth, is there something that you used to believe about leadership to be true that you no longer do? That you've evolved out of that belief system? Is there, you're making your face like there's a lot.
We could do an hour. Let me tell you something. If you really are growing, Gandhi talked about a false position, and his false position basically was that you try to hold on. If you're growing, growth means change, which means you can't hold on to things that you one time thought were true or you believed, because you're evolving and you're getting better. Let's put it this way. When I was 25, I had a lot of certainties. At 74, I have very few.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting.
Because life has taught me that it's not always black and white. It's not either or. It's not. It's many times a combination. But now here's what's beautiful. I have less. If I had 1,000 certainties at 24, at 74, I have 10. Okay, but can I tell you something about those 10? I'm more certain about those 10 than I ever have been before. They've been tested, and can I tell you something? A certainty that hasn't been tested can't be trusted. And so this whole process of growth means I am not the same. So people that knew me 20 years ago, it's like the guy who came up to me. I was speaking at a conference and he said, "Oh my gosh, this was amazing." He said, I could have heard you 20 years ago. And I smiled and I said, "No, you don't." He said, "Oh, no." He said, I wish I could have heard you 20 years. I said, "No, you don't." And he said, "Well, if I would have heard 20 years ago what I heard today," he said, "it would have changed my life." I said, "If you had heard me 20 years ago, you wouldn't have heard what you heard today."
That's awesome. That's so good.
I'm growing. Yeah. I'm growing. I'm evolving. I didn't come out of my mother's womb with the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership.
Right.
It's a process. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. And I think everyone listening to this should be gaining hope from this. That if you start on this journey of establishing your values and getting people sitting at the table with you and being a possibilist and committing to being a grower and getting to that place where people believe you can help them and that they can trust you. And these things are priceless. And for me to hear about the finish line today is something that I needed to evaluate. There's just so many things. Go ahead.
Can I tell you a quick story?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. It's about the finish line, because you said something about you had a couple of finish lines that were kind of self-imposed and they got there and they faded. Let me tell you, because I could tell you, see, what I really love was when I have time is to talk about all the mistakes, failures, and stupid things that I've done. Because I've often said, if you want to hear my success, we can do that in a day. If you want to hear about my stupidity, this will be a week series. and so I'm going to tell you, let me tell you a real. I had read this story about this guy that was a radio ham operator, and he said something about he'd taken the last marble out of his basket. And the basic story was that he put like 5 years of marbles for every week. And every week he'd go and he'd take a marble out, and he was in a countdown. And this morning I took my last marble out of my basket. And I thought, oh my gosh, I think because I was wanting to turn the companies over to Mark Cole, and I was wanting to pass on a lot of stuff, I said, I'm going to get me a jar so that you could see these marbles. And I put in like 3.5 years of marbles. And I told Mark, I told the whole company, in 3.5 years, I'm gone. So just understand this. It's over. Okay. And so every week I'd say, Mark, you take a marble out of that, here come the marbles start going smaller and smaller. How stupid can you be? and so it was true. Can I tell you something? I'll tell you how stupid I was. I was losing my marbles. Okay. That's how stupid I was.
Come on. That's so good.
So I literally get in front of a lot of the people who knew me well, and I had this big jar of marbles up here, and they'd heard the marble story. And I said, I just want you to know I was so stupid. I was so wrong. I mean, who wants to live their life like Cape Canaveral in a count town? You know what I'm saying? I mean, who wants to do it? And I picked up that, I'll never forget, I took that jar of marbles, and I just threw them on the floor.
He did.
And they just bounced everywhere. And I told him, I said, I'm never going to do this to me again. I'm not in a countdown. I'm only in a make your life count mode. And people today that are on my team, they say, I'll never forget the day you lost your marbles. And
that's wonderful.
but there's no finish line. There's no. I'm going to live till I die and not get the two confused.
Oh gosh, I love you. I wish there was no finish line for this conversation. I don't want there to be. There isn't for you and I, but there will be for the audience. And I just love you, and I just think you're incredible. You make me think. You make me laugh. You make me passionate. You increase my faith. I want to be more like you. I'm going to ask you a final question, but before I do, I just want to say this again, guys. Go get this book, Change Your World. John Maxwell, Rob Hoskins. And you just can see, we've scratched the surface of what's in this book, and it will change your world if you do the things in this book. I can't express that enough. What I'd like you to do last, John, is, I know everybody's hearing these things, and we've covered a lot of very practical things to do. But I think lastly, people listening to this are saying, I need a little hope. You talk about hope a great deal in the book, by the way. And yes, I heard you say in the beginning, anybody can change their life. But I want to go back to that lastly. Is there if I walked into you, I ran into you in a Starbucks, and I said, Mr. Maxwell, I've lost my business the last year. Or I've lost my family. I've lost all my money. I've gained a bunch of weight. I'm a little bit in despair right now. And but I'm a good man, or I'm a good woman. And I'd like to make a difference in my world, and maybe eventually the world. What would you say, just lastly, parting words to someone who asked you that question?
That's a great question. I said it at the first part of the book, Ed. I wrote these words that the people will read when they pick it up. Hope has two beautiful daughters, anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and courage to make a difference. I would tell people, hope has to have anger. You have to be discontented with where you are. You can't be no change happens in a comfort zone. In fact, COVID was wonderful. COVID-19 was wonderful in the fact that it got everybody out of the comfort zone. Everything a person wants or everything a person needs, but they don't have, is outside of their comfort zone. If it was in their comfort zone, they'd already have it. And so this is huge. So this is huge. You got to have anger. You got to say, I'm disturbed. I'm not where I want to be. I don't like this position. That's a healthy anger. That's a healthy anger, because that stirs you out of the comfort zone. And then you have to have courage to go into new territory where you've never been before and walk. That's why I love the book. I'm taking people on a tour with this book. In other words, if you'll have the courage to change your world, you say, I've never changed anything in my life. I hardly changed my bed. Okay. If you're willing to walk in this new virgin territory for you, I will walk with you, and I'll make sure that you get to the end. And for the first time, maybe in your life, you'll say, I did something that was really positive that made a difference in someone else's life, and that's where fulfillment comes in. So it takes anger and courage, and you can't if anger without courage, you curse the darkness. Courage with the anger is you won't pay the price. You got to have them both.